It is believed in Celtic mythology and certain pagan worldviews that high mountain tarns, lakes, llynns, whatever you call them, bodies of water in remote places, be they a small pool, a large lake or a stream, were portal ways or threshold spaces that connected the human world that we inhabit with the underworld, the world that exists underneath us in a different metaphysical reality, a reality of magic and fairies, Fae Folk, dragons and other worldly beings, and that at certain times of the year when the gap, the veil between these two worlds is thinnest, such as Halloween, Samhain, or perhaps the equinoxes of the year, that these portalways would open up and allow transmission between the two different worlds. This is just one of those many stories that we still have with us today. So, mae gyfarnon, croeso, and as always, welcome back to Cechle Chwedlau, the Grove of Stories. If you enjoy mythology, folklore, tales from around the world, then this is the channel for you. If you're new, welcome. If you are rejoining us, thank you very much. This is a story from the Brecon Beacons concerning the lake Llyn, which translates to the Lake of the Small Finger, a high mountain lake nestled up between two large and steep mountains in the east of the Brecon Beacons. And underneath this lake, a bit further down the mountain, was a small village called Myddfai. And in this village, there lived a young man called Gwyn with his mother, who was a widow. They were cattle farmers, though the father sadly was killed in a cattle raid that was common at the time this story takes place, about 1,500 years ago, when the Saxons were beginning to invade and incur into the Brythonic lands of Britain, and there was much skirmishing and fighting, not just between the Saxons and the Welsh, but also often between the Welsh and the Welsh, or should I say the Cymraeg, the Cymrogi, who often raided one another, stole each other's cattle, and in just one such raid, Gwyn's father was sadly killed, leaving them struggling. They were a poor family, they had a small flock of cattle to look after, and Gwyn was only about 18, so still very young, a young man, did his best to support his mother and their cattle and livestock. And Gwyn would often take his flock of cattle up to the shores of Llyn, because it was a broad, well-watered lake where the grasses as a result were very lush and nutritious, and the cows liked to graze there. And Gwyn also liked to go up there. He would sit by the shore and just listen to the birds, listen to the sound of water and wind running across the surface of the lake. And it was one evening at the end of a long day when he'd been daydreaming particularly long. Perhaps it was an equinox like it is now, perhaps it was approaching Samhain or Halloween, that in the distance of the lake he saw a strange ripple, which was odd because it was a still, calm evening, and out of the lake emerged a beautiful young lady, seemingly about the same age as him, incredibly fair with long, dark black hair that seemed to shine and radiate a presence from it. And she was dressed in a lovely flowing green robe from shoulder to toe that seemed to flow in the wind with her, even though there was no wind. She was an ethereal being, and she walked across the lake towards Gwyn. But Gwyn wasn't scared, wasn't nervous. He was intrigued by this, because as she walked, her footsteps left no ripple marks on the water. She approached Gwyn, and as she got closer, she just seemed ever more beautiful. She looked down at him, he looked up at her from where he was sat, and in that moment, as is often the case when you're a young boy and you see a beautiful girl, you're just completely lost for words, you can't think of anything. All he could think to do in that moment was hold up to her and offer her the only thing he had in his hand, which was his sandwich that he was going to have for dinner. It was a hard-baked bread with a thin slice of cheese in the middle. You know, like I say, they were quite a poor family. They didn't have much, but that was all he had, some hard-baked bread. He holds it up to her. Doesn't even say anything, just gestures, offers it to her. Perhaps she was hungry, who knows. And she looks down on it, and she smirks a little bit, but then she sniffs, turns her nose up, says, "Oh no, I don't think so. I'm a fairy princess, don't you know? A princess of the Fae Folk. I'm not going to have hard-baked bread and cheese. You'll have to do better than that, young Gwyn," she says. And Gwyn thinks, how on earth does she know my name? But before he can ask that, she's turned around and slowly she walks back across the lake again, leaving not a single ripple mark on the water as she goes until she reaches the centre and, like an elevator, just descends back down into the water. That was very strange, thought Gwyn. So he packs up all his stuff, collects his cattle, and makes his way back to his mother's house. And he tells her about the stories, and she is very intrigued because this was a time, like I say, 1,500 years ago, the end of the Celtic Age, really, when magic was beginning already to diminish from the world. There were no more dragons, no more dwarves. The occasional wizard and druid still wandered about, but they were few and far between, and the stories of the Fae Folk, well, they had become just that, stories, myths, legends, and people, for the most part, doubted whether they were even true at all, whether they'd even happened. For the most part, I should say, because there were always some who still believed, either the very old or the very wise, and Gwyn's mother was one of those, and she had an inclination of what might be up. So they discussed the matter and say, that's interesting. She didn't want hard-baked bread. I tell you what we should do then, Gwyn, my son, we'll make soft-baked bread, barely even risen dough, really nice and light and fluffy. We'll see if she likes that instead. And let's give you an even thicker slice of cheese. In fact, I'll tell you what, make it 2 slices of cheese. I know she's a princess, but she can't say no to that. So the next day, the same thing. Gwyn takes his cattle up to Llyn and he sat there all day looking out over the lake until same time, evening time, just before dinner, as he's getting ready to potentially pack up, she rises again out of the lake, walks across, leaving no ripples, looks at Gwyn, and Gwyn had been thinking all day of what he was going to say to her. But, as is often the case when you're trying to talk to a beautiful woman, he opens his mouth and they get caught in his throat. All he can do is stammer, hold up his lovely sandwich, soft baked bread, But no, even this is not good enough. But at least this time, she doesn't smirk, she smiles at Gwyn. She even chuckles and she says, close, but still not really my cup of tea, she says. And with that, she turns to walk away, and Gwyn finally finds the courage to say something and says, "What's your name?" She turns around and she says, "My name is Nell, Princess of the Fae Folk." And she returns to the lake. In the middle, back down she goes. Gwyn packs up his stuff, runs back with his cattle to his mum. They discuss this in great depth and they decide that there's only one thing for it. She doesn't like hard-baked bread nor soft-baked bread. 2 slices of cheese didn't do it. They would have to make half-baked bread, neither hard nor soft. 2 slices of cheese, but this time they were going all out with the sandwich and they decided to put butter on both bits of half-baked bread. So, morning comes around, first light, Gwyn is off, back up the hills to Llyn sits there all day watching the cattle until same time of day, evening, up she comes again, Nell of the Fae Folk. And she walks over towards Gwyn, and Gwyn this time has finally found the courage to speak, and he presents to her his sandwich. Here you go, half-baked this time, neither hard nor soft, 2 slices of scrumptious cheese and butter. She looks down on it. "Ooh, that looks delicious," she says. Takes it, eats it, smiles, compliments the marvellous bakery skills of Gwyn and his mother. And then she sits down on the water's edge, being very careful not to go on land. And there, her and Gwyn chat for hours, well past the setting sun. The cattle get bored, they make their way down the mountains without Gwyn back to the farm, and they discuss everything. They talk about their lives, they talk about the worlds they come from, their parents, their hopes, dreams and ambitions for life, until the sun's gone, it's fully dark, it's time for Nell to return to the other world. So they part ways. He says, "Will I see you again?" And she looks back and she says, "Tomorrow, same time, same place." Gives him a little wink, returns to the middle of the lake, and down she goes. Same thing again. Fourth day, same sandwich. Fourth evening, she comes, sits by the side of the lake, eats the sandwich, and this time she tells Gwyn all about the world as it was in the elder days, before the Celts came to Britain. She tells him of the Beaker people. Before they came to Britain, she tells of a mighty land bridge that once connected Britain to the mainland, and of all the nomadic hunter-gatherers that lived there in those days. And even before then, before humans were even humans, she tells him of the ancient times when the world was inhabited purely by Fae Folk and other magical creatures. And she tells him all the stories of the past and that they are in fact real. And Gwyn is just captivated for the whole evening until it's time for her to go. And as she gets up to walk away, she turns around. "Same place, same time, tomorrow?" she asks. Gwyn excitedly nods like a boy in love. And so, fifth day, fifth sandwich, same time, fifth evening. She comes to the edge of the lake, and this time it's a clear night sky, and they look up at the stars, and she explains to him all the constellations, where they come from, what they mean, how they got there, and they talk deep into the night this time, well past sunset, until she leaves again, looks back. Same time, same place tomorrow, she says, nods, returns to the middle of the lake, and back she goes to the other world. Sixth day, sixth night. This time, as she's walking across to Gwyn that evening, Gwyn looks down and notices she's wearing sandals. And what's interesting about these sandals is the way they're tied. The right foot has been done up as a double knot with bunny ears, but the left shoe, the left sandal, is only loosely tied with a reef knot, which is strange. But she sits down, and this time she tells Gwyn about all the different plants and herbs and grasses and flowers that can be found and seen around the area of Llyn-y-Fanfach, where they come from, what they do, what they can be used for, how they can benefit his cattle, how they can be made into potions and spells and ointments. And this is great knowledge, Gwyn thinks, because he'll be able to use this to make his cattle even healthier. And this time, she gets up and she gives Gwyn, before she leaves, a small kiss on the cheek. And Gwyn has been so captivated with Nell, the fairy princess, that he gets down on one knee, and before she can turn around to leave, he proposes to her. He asks her to marry him, to leave the other world and come and live with him in the mortal world. And she says, "Same time, same place tomorrow. You'll have to ask my father." Winks at him, returns to the middle of the lake. Down she goes. So, seventh day, the big day, the end of the week. Gwyn is up well before dawn. He's at the lake for sunset. He's wearing his finest Sunday dress, and he sits and he waits all day. And this time he's made 2 half-baked sandwiches of half-baked bread. One for Nell and one for Nell's father, who he expects will be making a visit. Only this evening, a different figure comes out of the lake. A tall, slender man with a young appearance, but an old complexion, an old energy, an old presence, strides in a kingly manner across the lake with a huge air of confidence and aura about him. Again, much like Nell, leaving no footsteps, no ripples in his wake. And he looks down at Gwyn, appears to size him up, get the measure of the man, and gives a small nod of approval. Not perhaps from Gwyn's physical appearance, because he was after all a young man and a poor man, but perhaps he was looking deeper into Gwyn and trying to gauge the essence of his character, I suppose. And he says, "Young man, I hear you wish to marry my daughter. But which daughter is it you wish to marry?" And with that, 3 beautiful fairy princesses, young fairy ladies, come up out of the water. Each one looking identical to Nell. Same green dress, same dark black hair, same beautiful face. And he looks at them, and they all look back at him, and then he looks down, and he looks at their feet, and he sees they're all wearing the same sandals. Only 2 of them have their sandals tied with the same knot. But the fairy on the left, she has one sandal tied up with bunny ears and the other tied with a reef knot. He looks up, he looks at her, he smiles at her, he looks to the fairy king. "This is your daughter I wish to marry, sir." The king says, "Very well, you have chosen wisely, nay, you have chosen correctly. I give you my blessing to marry Nell." And with that, Nell steps across, and as Nell crosses that threshold into the human world, steps foot on the shores of the lake for the first time, her father and her 2 sisters descend back below the surface of the water to the Otherworld. And in their place, coming out behind them, stride 40 cattle. Strong and black and proud they go. Nell explains that this is her dowry, a wedding gift from her father. 40 cattle, not just any cows, immortal cows, completely resistant to sickness, pestilence, poor health, ageless, forever fertile. They'll always produce milk, always produce offspring, and their offspring too will be immortal. What a great gift that was. And for the first time, Nell and Gwyn embrace and kiss as lovers, and they make their way with the new cattle and Gwyn's old cattle, who were rather surprised by this new addition to their herd. They make their way back to Mindvai, and there they tell the mum the great news, and the next day they're married in the village, and the church bells ring all day, and it's a great celebration. And later that wedding night, Nell explains to Gwyn the very important conditions to their marriage. She explains that he must never strike her for whatever reason. He must never hit her. If he does it 3 times, she and all her cattle will return to the Otherworld. And Gwyn pays great attention to this, determined never to let that happen. He thinks that should be easy. Many years go by, I don't know how long, but the cattle herd grows and prospers, and they become incredibly wealthy. They prosper for many years, so much so that Gwyn is able to retire his mother, buy her a house in the town down in the valley, Llandovery, where it's said she marries a butcher, also a widower who lost his wife. And there they have a very happy second marriage, the 2 of them, and no doubt the butcher and Gwyn the successful farmer with his immortal herd. No doubt they compensate each other's business a great deal. And in time, Nell gives birth to their first son, their first of 3 that come out in quick succession. However, this is where the fairy tale aspect of the story begins to unravel. For it's said of the Fae Folk that when they give birth, they pass on a certain portion of their life energy, their life essence, onto their offspring, and that's how they maintain their immortality, and why, despite being immortal, they never reach great numbers, great populations. And 3 sons Nell gave to Gwyn, and with each passing son she passed on a bit of her life to her boys, and with it she grew ever more slightly diminished. Not in appearance, she was beautiful, but perhaps in radiance, a little bit of her had literally passed on. She didn't quite have the same energy that she once did, the same love of life. They still had a very happy marriage, but as the years went on, she began to grow slightly ever more distant. It was as if she was developing a Hiraeth all of her own. And one evening, they were getting ready on horseback to go down to the town of Llandovery for dinner with Gwyn's mother and Gwyn's stepfather. But as they were about to go, Gwyn looks over and he notices that Nell is sat motionless on her horse, almost seeming to stare into the distance, into no man's land, with just a blank expression on her face. Whatever's the matter, my love? What's wrong? She doesn't respond for a while, and she just looks at him again with a blank expression and says, "I forgot my riding gloves. I left them in the house." "Don't worry," says Gwyn, "I can get them for you. I've not mounted yet." So he runs into the house, gets his gloves, and he comes back out, and she's still there, gazing into the distance. He tells her, he says, "I've got your gloves," and she doesn't reply. She just sits there. So he throws them up, the gloves up to Nell for her to catch. But as he throws up the gloves hits her on the face and they fall to the ground. And she looks over at Gwyn and says, "That was the first blow, my love. 2 more and I will leave you forever." And Gwyn is very distraught, very distressed by this, and he resolves never to strike her again. A few more years go on until eventually their eldest son turns 18 as well and is due to be married, getting married to a lovely girl down in Llandovery. And they're at the wedding and the feasting is done and the dancing begins. And Nell and Gwyn are dancing in a circle like a barn dance with everyone else. But even though it's her son's wedding, her firstborn's wedding, who she loves very much, after a while she seems to grow tired and weary of the party before any of the other guests. And again she develops that distant blank look on her face, as if she has a longing for something else or somewhere else. And Gwyn is trying his best to cheer her up with the dancing, but she's not really getting into it. She's a bit behind time. She's not moving as freely, with as much flow as she used to. And Gwyn raises his hand to meet hers as they dance around in a circle, but she doesn't raise her hand. Gwyn raises his a bit too quickly and he strikes her just glancingly on the chin. And with that she comes back alive again. She looks at him and says, "That was the second needless blow, my love. 1 more and I will leave you forever." Which put a bit of a dampener on the wedding, but like I say, this is the part of the fairy tale where it no longer becomes the traditional fairy tale that you may have heard before. So, the next day, Gwyn is trying his best to make it up, to rekindle some of the romance and the joy in their marriage. And he says, "You know what, I'm going to bake her favourite thing in the world, a cheese and butter sandwich of half-baked bread. And he's making it up, and he's just about to finish, but he hasn't noticed that Nell has entered the kitchen while he's cooking. One of the Fae Folk women, she could walk unheard, even unseen if she chose to. And she went and she stood behind Gwyn to see what he was doing, but didn't tell him. Maybe she was curious, maybe it was simply providence, who knows. But Gwyn takes his cloth when he's done, washes the dough off his hands with his washing cloth, goes to flick it over his shoulder, and as the tail end moves over, it strikes Nell on the nose. He turns around to see what's happened, and there she is. She looks at him aghast. I don't think she meant for that to happen. I think it was probably providence. But nonetheless, she looks at him. She says, "I'm sorry, my love. That was the third of 3. I must leave you now. Farewell." And with that, she turns around. She leaves the house. She doesn't collect any of her belongings. She makes her way back up the mountain, and as she goes, all her immortal cattle, all 40 of them, follow her off. Gwyn follows, of course, begging her to stay, beseeching her, but she doesn't give him so much as a backward glance. She can't. It's fairy magic. She reaches the lake, she walks into it. The cattle walk in with her, only this time, unlike she did many, many years before, she doesn't walk on the lake, she simply walks straight into it until she and all her cattle are gone, and on the surface of that clear, still night is left no more than a single ripple on the water's surface. And Gwyn breaks down at the shores of the lake, and he cries and he weeps all through the night, begging her to come back, praying into the nothingness of that still lake for her to return. But of course she doesn't return, and come morning, Gwyn returns back to his house where his 2 youngest sons remain. His eldest son is off living his new life with his new wife. And in time, Gwyn's other sons reach 18, marry, move on with their lives. It should be noted that these are not human, not fairy, they are halflings, changelings, some people call them, half fairy, half human. And these people, if you can call them people, have a very magical quality about them. They can become many things. They can become great leaders, great writers, great poets, great warriors, great athletes. Perhaps you've seen them. They're not just exceptional in their skill and their magical qualities, but they have a sort of a sad, distant demeanour to them, as if they, I suppose, belong to neither world, as if they don't really fully fit in. Perhaps you've met one of these changelings, one of these halflings before in your travels, in your journeys. Maybe they still walk the world among us, who knows. But in time, Gwyn carries on living his life as best he can, but eventually his kids all move on with their lives, and not long after that, his dearest mother, living in Llandovery, she passes away and she's buried. And Gwyn grows fairly old, or at least old for the times. Who knows what that was, maybe somewhere in his 50s, I suppose. He passes away, and he didn't in truth have much joy in the latter portion of his life without his love, Nell. But he did have a fantastic marriage with her, it should be said, and he had a nice childhood, despite being losing his father, despite being poor. So it was a mixed life for Gwyn. And when he dies, his children return from where they were living, from the journeys and adventures they were on out in the world, to bury their father, but they find his will, and his last remains was that he would be cremated at Llyn-y-Fanfach, and that his ashes would be scattered across the lake, so that in death he could perhaps, by some small hope, be reunited in some small way with the love of his life, the person that gave his life joy, which was of course his wife, Nell. And as the sons light the fire to start the cremation, the pyre erupts in a massive flame, and then out of the lake emerges their mother, who they recognise right away, though she hasn't aged a day, of course, though her sons are, and her sons are now seemingly older than her, though who really knows how old Nell was. And she comes over to see her boys, and she embraces them, and they walk on the water with her for the first time, embracing their fairy magic. And they can do this, they can merge the threshold between the two worlds, though Nell cannot step foot on the ground now that she has returned to the other world. But they hug, and she apologises to them. She explains why she had to leave, but gives them some hope that they can spend some time together. And they do. For many years after that, they go up frequently, the boys, who are now men, to the lake, and there, with their mother, they learn all there is to learn about herb lore, hedge lore, witchcraft, if you want to call it that, medicine, the human body. She teaches them about all the plants, all the medicinal properties they have, all the health benefits they have, all the trees and the berries that grow not just in Wales, but all across the world, where they can be found, how they can be identified, what they can be made into. And she tells them that their mission, their purpose in life now is to go and spread this knowledge of physiology and herb lore and medicine across as much of the world as they can, that they are to become the physicians of Myddfai. And if you look up the historical records that survive from the 11th, 12th, 13th century, you can find historical reference to these very same physicians of Myddfai. So who knows how much truth there is left in this story, how much of its core truth has survived in the many retellings over the years. But that is the legend of the Lady of the Lake, her marriage to Gwyn, the humble farmer, with whom they had 3 sons, who when they returned to the lake to cremate their father and return him with Nell, their mother, returned to her boys, who she left, her halfling, half fairy, half human sons, that she then taught to the ways of medicine and healing. And that's all I have time for today. That is the story. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please like this video to help it grow. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you. And as always, I will see you in the next story.